All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the third and final session in our three-part virtual back to school series, Tips and Tricks for Landing a Top Internship. My name is Susan Kleiman, and I'm the Manager of Alumni Engagement at NAF. Before I welcome our speakers, a little housekeeping. Please be sure to mute yourselves when you're not speaking and keep your cameras on if possible, because our speakers would love to see your faces. If you have questions at any point, do not hesitate to raise your hand or put them in the chat. And I'll be back at the end of the session with some announcements and our gift card raffle. So without further ado, I'm so pleased to welcome our speakers for today's session. First up, we have Heather Faulkner from Verizon. Heather has been in talent acquisition with Verizon since 2007 and joined Verizon as a recruiter in 2013. At Verizon, she has supported a wide variety of corporate and tech functions for both professional and campus staffing, and is currently the Associate Director for U.S. Campus Execution, Relations, and Experience. In her current role, she oversees the campus workforce plan staffing, school relationships aligned to Verizon staffing strategies, and overall program experience. Prior to working at Verizon, she worked at Hertz and Agilon Professional Staffing. Heather's love for talent comes from her personal mission. As a leader, my goal is to show everyone I meet compassion, empathy, a strong desire to win, and a pay-it-forward mentality, because connectivity is more than 5G, it's people. So now let's hire the future together. In her spare time, she loves hanging out and doing fun activities with her kids, as well as photography. Also with us today is Sean Treccia from KPMG. Sean is a director on the talent acquisition team for KPMG LLP, a professional services firm with over 80 US offices and more than 12,000 US hires per year. In this role, he has direct leadership of three key functions: events and relations, inclusion and diversity, and branding and marketing for all talent acquisition groups: campus recruiting, experienced hire, and senior and executive talent. In addition, Sean leads the global student programs, such as the KPMG Ideation Challenge, the Global Internship Program, and the Global Advantage Leadership Program. Sean also serves as a national instructor for the KPMG Business School, teaching a variety of courses. So welcome, Sean and Heather. Thank you so much for being here today. And I'd like to kick off the conversation by asking each of you just to talk about your company's process for hiring interns and what you look for in potential candidates. How many interns do you hire annually?
Heather, would you like to go first?
I was just going to ask you the same thing. Sure, I'll kick us off. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here today. It's really great to make your acquaintance. I like to say it like that. So Verizon is a well-known brand, but I think when people think about our internships, they might think, hey, I don't really want to work in a store. So even though I would love to launch an actual internship program in our store, and I'm talking to our retail friends about that, our current US internship is actually focused a lot on working directly on our network and then in our corporate functions. So it's in my new role, it's to grow that more. So globally, we hire about 1,000 interns, which might sound like a lot, but it's actually probably small compared to most Fortune 20 companies our size. Our US intern is about 50% of that. So yes, 50% of our interns are global, and then we manage about 500 in the US. And that's divided mostly within our global network in tech space, finance, supply chain, cybersecurity that protects our employees, not necessarily our customers, and then our marketing and product groups. And that's divided between undergrad interns and MBA interns and PhD interns. So when we're thinking about that sort of volume, how we manage that process is we still get a high volume of candidates through the network that are interested in those roles based on the targeted info sessions we look to acquire talent. So the first thing you would do is hopefully you would meet us at an event at a school that we sponsor. And then after that, you would be encouraged to apply. And we try to have a very human experience, since we know we're looking for a different amount of volume and the right fit. Because at Verizon, if you're an intern, you're not competing against another intern for a full-time role. You're only competing against yourself. So after you apply, you will first have to you'll be reviewed to see if you meet our basic qualifications. So it's really important to tell students that, because you want to put your grad date, you want to explain what your major is on your resume. We list it out exactly in our job description, what will be required in that basic qualification. And I'll say what you need to have. And then there will be another ancillary section. I'll say, it'll be nice if you had this too, but it's not at all required. So if you meet those BQs, basic qualifications, you're going to be sent an assessment. If you it's a pass-fail assessment, going to be open and transparent. If you pass that assessment, then you're going to automatically guarantee yourself a chat with a recruiter. And if that chat goes well and you go through that process, we'll align you to a hiring manager interview. You'll find that a lot of people will say, I don't ever see Verizon internship postings, so they go up, they come down. That is true. It is a very competitive process because our volume is not as high.
Wait a second.
And we won't just, it's all good, Sam. We won't just keep internship postings up to advertise that we do have internships. Once we think we have the right amount of talented applicants, we'll stop the competitive process and go through that pool and make it very interactive with that pool. And if for any reason we are flexible and we add internship positions or such, then we'll repost them at that time. So my advice to you, and we'll get to that a little bit later, is if you see a Verizon internship, you're super interested, even if you're thinking it through, apply right away, because there's a good chance we'll close that rec in a matter of weeks.
All right. Well, our process, thank you, Heather, for that summary there. And our process isn't that different than Heather's. So as Susan mentioned at the beginning, I work for KPMG. We're a professional services firm, so think of it as consulting. We provide mainly accounting, financial consulting to clients, as well as technology consulting are the two main areas. We hire about 3,500 interns a year in the US, and they're split with about 1,000 in the winter and about 2,500 in the summer. Winter internships are very big for people who are in the accounting major. So if you're not an accounting major, you probably wouldn't think of that much, but the busy season for doing taxes and accounting work for organizations tends to be January, February, March. So we do have a very large winter intern group. We hire interns across the US. We have 85 offices in pretty much every major city. The internship, much like Verizon, is designed to lead to a full-time position. So as Heather said, you're not competing against other interns for a job. You're competing against yourself. Our goal is to fill 90% of our full-time positions with interns. So our internship recruiting is actually significantly more competitive than our full-time recruiting, because full-time is filling the gaps that we don't fill with the interns. Our interns get a full-time offer about 90% of the time. Surprisingly, when those who don't get an offer, it's rarely because they can't do the work. It's almost always because of what I would call soft skills, their attention to detail, their communication, their willingness to show up and do the job, all things that should be in the intern's control. So in terms of the types of students we look for, I mentioned accounting is a big group. Probably 50% of those 3,500 interns have to be an accounting major on track to eventually get their CPA license. The other 50% are a mix, with the bulk being technology related, computer science, computer engineering, management information systems, somewhere in the technology space. I'd say maybe 40% there. The remaining 10% are a mix of finance, marketing, supply chain, some MBAs, some PhDs, some law school, but the bulk are going to be either accounting or some type of technology major. Our internship really it's client facing, and our interns charge their time to clients. We really treat our interns like a full-time professional. Because of that, we only allow students to intern 1 year before their final year of school. So much like Heather said, when you really meeting your graduation date and other things on your resume, we really need to understand if you're going to finish school, so graduate and any extra degrees you're getting, say in 2025, you'd be eligible to intern in 2024. either winter or summer. Again, that's because we expect you to convert to full-time the next year. And if you haven't had enough classes at that point, you can't really do the client work. So it's really that last year. In terms of timing, we have 2 big recruiting seasons. One is right now. We post our positions open on our website. You can go to kpmgcareers.com and find any of our roles. They're usually posted from August 1st to about the end of September. Actually, I believe tomorrow, most of our positions will close. Similar to what Heather said, some positions close early because we get a lot of applicants and we need to stop it at some point. There are some positions that are less popular, and those may stay open all year, just hoping to get some people who are interested in them. And then we'll have another big recruiting season in January, February. Our process requires an application. We don't have an assessment test at this time. It is something we are looking at, but filling out the application, the recruiters review the resume, make decisions on who's going to be interviewed. Then the hiring team, the people from the group you would be working with, conduct 2 virtual interviews. So online, live, but online interviews, and make the selections for who gets an offer. So that's a short summary of kind of our process, not significantly different than Verizon's. So yeah, I will stop there.
How many of your interns are US versus global? Because I know you have a global presence.
Yeah, so the 3,500 I mentioned are just US. Global, over 10,000. Because we're a partnership, in case any of you are interested in working in other countries, we do work with KPMG in other countries, but the recruiting process is separate in each country. So if any of you say are Canadian and want to work in Canada, I can get you to our recruiting team in Canada, but that's managed through a different process than the US.
Perfect. And we have a question.
Same with Verizon, because if you want to work in Ireland or India, Australia, we have internship programs there, but the country laws are so different. I have to connect you with those individuals.
Correct. Yep, same thing.
Absolutely. We have a question in the chat from Nina. What are your tips for freshmen in college in terms of internship, or what to do over the summer to gain some relative experience?
Good question. I'll start with that one. A couple of things. One is, as a freshman, and I've spoken to freshmen all the time, get involved in activities at campus, whatever they may be, sports, drama, business clubs, something to get you out of just going to class. Or if you have a part-time job, that's good too. But getting involved with student organizations or anything where you can start to meet other people. Also, go to your career center and start to understand when employers are coming to campus, what types of jobs they're looking for. The Career Center can help you work on a resume and interview practice. That's really important because while some companies will hire freshmen, a lot won't, but a lot of companies, we are one, offer different leadership programs to freshmen. 1-2 day leadership programs, sometimes on campus, sometimes in a local office, where you can start to meet people. And then even if you don't get a formal internship, if you can have any kind of work over the summer, even if you're working as a lifeguard, if you're working at McDonald's, something that shows you on a resume, when I look, I know, okay, that person knows what it's like to go to work, show up, have a boss. I worked at Subway in high school. I was a sandwich artist, was our title in Subway. So not the greatest job in the world, but hey, it was a high school job, but it helped me learn I have a boss. I have to go in. I have to report on time. I have to do certain things. So anything that can give you that kind of experience, whether it's paid or unpaid, it's not about a glamorous internship with a big name company. It's about showing you can balance school and other activities, be it work or outside clubs or anything, and that you have some experience doing some kind of work somewhere.
I love all that. That's all true. What I would say, just to not duplicate it, is please attend those events. When I go to an info session, whether it's virtual or in person, and I meet a freshman, I'm actually excited because I'm going to put you on my early engagement trackers. We host early engagement info sessions with freshmen and sophomores. I do have some programs for sophomores in finance and in tech, but for, if you're interested in supply chain and other types of corporate avenues or even sales, you have to wait to be a junior. But I'm still going to have tech talks. I'm still going to invite you to my newsletters. Just don't get discouraged. Don't let that stop your momentum to say, I'm still going to show up, even though you might feel rejected. We don't take it that way. It shows us the initiative that you're ready and you're thinking about it. And that makes me want to hone in to make sure I stay in touch with you until you are ready to be an employee of mine.
Yep.
Absolutely. Networking is so important. It never hurts to reach out to people through LinkedIn if you're interested in a job.
Yeah, like fun fact, we'll host all of our info sessions for our early engagement on a really dynamic platform in July, August, and they get the first access to all of our internships. So if I built a relationship with you, it even might be 3 years old, but you're on my list, you're going to get access to all my internships before they land on Handshake or something.
Wow. Wow. And I bet you're not the only person who does that.
Right. Right.
I was wondering, you both must see so many resumes for any given position. What can our students do to make their resumes stand out in a good way? And how important are cover letters in 2022?
Your turn to start, Heather.
Oh, okay. The cover letter, I think, is a really personal answer. For me, I'm not going to look at your cover letter in the way that I say it as a recruiter. But when I'm hiring for my team, I'm absolutely going to read your cover letter. So what I mean to say is if you make it through the recruiting screening process for these large companies, the recruiter is screening to make sure you meet the basic qualifications and the skills, and they feel confident that they're going to be able to present you really well to the hiring manager they're trying to serve. And if you could do that and get yourself through that algorithm or whatever it might be, then at that point, when you're trying to impress the hiring manager, I think it is really good to tailor a cover letter and tell that personal story to that leader. So that's how I'll answer that. But I feel like you can ask that 50 different ways and you might get 50 different answers on what people feel about cover letters. The volume that I see, I have to deal with, I'm dealing with roughly 70,000 applicants for 500 jobs. My recruiters aren't going to read your cover letter. They're going to make sure you don't have typos. They're going to make sure you're part of the leadership clubs, like Sean mentioned. They're going to make sure that you meet the majors and maybe 1 or 2 skills in our preferred qualifications, not all of them. Don't get intimidated by that. The manager will certainly want to make sure that you're the right person for that job. To answer the first part of the question, as far as what to do to make your resume stand out, no grammatical errors. I really love it when students have that section of just the skills or what course curriculum. I love it when they point out their community involvement and how they're volunteering. Verizon's very heavy on our credo. And if you listen to our CEO, he talks a lot about the society being a stakeholder. So if you have something on your resume that says that you're giving back to your community, you might stand out over somebody who has a 4.0. Just being really honest. We're not going for the smartest person. We're going for the person that's going to fit our culture. And we have a commitment to volunteer 2.5 million hours by 2025. We're halfway there. And you as an intern will have to be part of that journey with us. So it's part of our interview process. And we'll also just make sure that you're part of the right course curriculum. But we kind of know that because we're targeting certain schools that are teaching that and we're helping influence that curriculum. I'm sure just as KPMG is and other major companies, we help them with that. So those are the sorts of things that I look for, is just make sure that you have no grammatical errors. You've really thought through how you're going to present yourself and you're demonstrating your contributions to the society.
One thing I won't duplicate what Heather said. I would agree with everything. My cover letter story is similar. We don't look at them until later on in the interview process for the same reason. The volume's too high. There's no time for recruiters to look at cover letters. Now, once you get selected for an interview, then the interviewers may want to look at some of the cover letters, as Heather said, similar to their process and to understand you a little more. But in that first step in the application, the tens of thousands of applications, we don't have time for that. So being honest about that. But again, that can vary by company. If you're applying for a small role at a company that doesn't get many applicants, it may make a big difference. So I don't want to say it never matters, but I'm going to say at least at larger organizations, it's usually not a major thing. The only other thing I'd add on resume, other things is, if you have a GPA, if you changed majors and maybe your overall GPA isn't as strong as your new major GPA, list that major GPA. The thing we will say, for example, is I've interviewed students whose overall GPA may be a 3.1 because they were a pre-med major, but then they changed to accounting, and after the last year and a half, they have a 3.9. Well, if they just list the 3.1, they're not going to look quite as strong. But I honestly don't care what they got in their biology class. We're not hiring them to do biology. So, I won't tell the professor that, but it doesn't really matter. I care what you're getting in the classes that matter, that show you can do the work. So if your major GPA is stronger than your overall, you can list that. The other thing I'd say is be careful with clubs and organizations, because a lot of clubs, and it was a long time ago when I was in college, but for a lot of the clubs, all you had to do was show up at one meeting and sign your name, and you could officially be listed with the club. And the meetings offered like free soda and pizza. So you'd go, you get the free dinner, and you'd show up. And I see these student resumes sometimes that have 16 clubs they're part of. Being part of a club doesn't tell me anything. What you did in that tells me something. So regardless of what it is, I don't care if you were on, the soccer club or you were babysitting, whatever, that's wonderful. What did you do? Were you the captain of the team? Were you the one who organized the meetings? Did you manage the finance or the money that the organization had? That is really meaningful, more so than just a name of a bunch of clubs. And honor societies are great also, but they're usually tied to GPA, that you automatically get in them with a certain GPA. So sometimes students, I would list them, but sometimes students will put them at the top. If you have a 3.8 GPA, I don't really need to see what honor society in, because I already know you have a good GPA that gets you into those. So you want the things that are going to distinguish you. Any jobs that you've had where you've had unique experiences, where you've had to manage budgets or difficult situations or work with different people, those are the kind of things that really help stand out. And if you've been a waiter or waitress, you deal with difficult people all the time. So don't put that down on the bottom, put that on there. Customer service is a big part of all of our jobs. So
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said put things on your resume that will distinguish yourself from others, because I've seen students' resumes and I've seen the skills section, and they're not really listing the skills that are going to make them stand out. Instead of saying, fluent in another language, they'll just say something general like I'm a team player or I know the Microsoft Office suite. But I really encourage students to really emphasize your skills so that you stand out. Oh, very glad that you said that. And I'm going to move on to the next question and ask, in today's professional world, it definitely seems like you now have to have at least one internship to be considered for a white collar job after graduation, which was a little different when I was in school, when internships were maybe, nice to haves, but not, a requirement. So is it true? Do you really need to have at least one internship? And how does an internship set you up for career success?
Sure. I'll start with that one. So to answer the first part, do you have to have an internship? No, it definitely helps, though. Not to have the internship to get another internship. I don't expect that necessarily, but to get a full-time job, when we're looking at full-time candidates who didn't intern with us, it's okay if you haven't had another internship, but what have you done? I joke, Heather said this too, about like not always looking for the perfect GPA. Years ago, I still remember I interviewed the valedictorian of the graduating class at Notre Dame, who had like a 4.9 GPA on a 4 scale. I don't even know how you do that. But we didn't hire the student because during his 4 years in college, he didn't have any part-time jobs. He wasn't in any clubs. He didn't play any sports. He didn't volunteer. He did nothing. And as I talked to him about that, I asked how he managed his school and everything else. He said he didn't have time to manage anything outside of classes. And my feeling was, if you think you're that busy at 22-year-old in school, you're not going to be able to manage work and anything else. School's busy. We were all in school at some point. I remember it. But this person didn't show any ability to do anything with any other people. He was just focused on his work, his schoolwork. So that was a challenge. To the second part about, I forget, is it the internship? Not just was it important, but trying to blank on what you said.
How does an intern set for success?
Oh, how does the internship set apart?
Yeah.
So I view the internship as ours is 10 weeks. So I view it as a 10-week interview for you and us. I interned, I was a civil engineering major in college, and I interned for the city of Elmhurst in Illinois, where I grew up, and learned I didn't want to be an engineer. So that was good. It helped me learn after 10 weeks rather than taking a full-time job and then having to switch later. So the internship is very helpful because it lets us evaluate you in a real situation, but it also allows you to evaluate the employer. you can decide not only is this employer one I want to work at, but is this a job I want to do? And if you decide no, it's easier to make that decision after the internship and go a different path when you're looking for full-time than it is to start and spend the first 3 years somewhere if you don't like it. So I really think you should be looking at internships, not just who pays what, or who gives me this benefit, but who's going to give me the best experience to help me see, is this what I want to do for the next 3 to 5 years after graduation, whatever it may be. So that'd be my thoughts on it.
I'll try not to duplicate because it sounds like Sean and I think a lot the same, but what I'll admit is, even though I lead Verizon's US campus team, I came to be in campus in a very untraditional route. So I actually started in a community college, and I thought I wanted to be a graphic designer. And I immediately got a graphic design internship at a local color shop where color coding print ads for like the Children's Place. And I immediately realized that I just really like to paint, and I don't want to be a digital graphic artist. And I would have never come to that conclusion on my own if I didn't do an internship. I would have continued the trajectory of trying to be a graphic artist and then spent all this money on a degree, like, oops. And then I shifted my major to be in accounting. And in school, I realized that I'm really good at math, but I like to talk a lot. So that might not work out really well for me. And I did that through being on a capstone project that was connected to the community college that I was going to. And then I kind of took like a hiatus from school. I just felt like I needed to do that for myself. And I'm going to admit that because I think it's okay to find yourself. And I had all these skills, but I realized I was really good at sales, and someone introduced me to recruiting. And then that's how I got into Agilon, which Susan mentioned, which taught me, the basics of HR. And then I was lucky enough to get myself into a company like Verizon, who has paid nearly $50,000 for my degree. And I, of course, contributed to that. And I now have my bachelor's degree in human resources. And that's okay. So I did a lot of different internships, not even in my scope of work I do today, to help get me to where I am today. And I learned a lot. And I think it's one of the things I love about being in this role, even though I didn't do the traditional path, is we think about reskilling programs and looking at students in a different way than they must have known and figured it all out by their freshman year. We don't expect that. And most companies don't expect that. And it's okay to change majors, and it's okay to explain that story, and as long as you demonstrate it. I've definitely hired, does an internship set you up for success? Yes, because I talk to individuals who might currently be majoring in something today that they didn't start, and they have other internships. Like they might be trying to get into tech, but they have marketing internships. And that's okay because they're speaking to the transferable skills. That's kind of like my point of being flexible with yourself and not saying it's impossible if I didn't know what I was doing from day one. And it's also okay if you completely graduate. One of our SVP of technology, her major is zoology. Okay. But, obviously went back to school, went a different path. So I do think it's a little bit tougher in today's world when you're trying to get straight. I didn't go straight into a large company. I started in little companies and got that opportunity. But you have to advocate for yourself. You have to sell that for yourself. And you have to think about, what is the brand that I'm trying to identify for myself? You all have a brand. Don't get imposter syndrome that you don't have a brand and that you might not have that story yet. It's up to you to create that story. I'm happy to help you do that. But think about that old school, like, how do I sell a pen to a salesman that sells paper? You can do it, but you have to figure out, what is that story?
Sean, did you have some similar experiences when you were in school, or did you kind of always know the general path you wanted to take?
Very, not necessarily the same path Heather took, but very varied path all over. As I mentioned, I was a civil engineering major at University of Illinois, changed after 2 years, became a kinesiology major because I wanted to do sports marketing. Got a job with the Cubs when I graduated, was laid off before I ever started because they cut all their new hires before I even started. So then needed a job, just went into sales, selling software, didn't really like it, and wanted to do more marketing. So I went back and got my master's degree, my MBA, focused on marketing, joined KPMG out of grad school to do marketing, but didn't like marketing for a professional services firm, but saw that campus recruiting really is marketing. You're just marketing jobs to students instead of marketing tax services to clients. So moved into campus recruiting back a long time ago and have been in recruiting ever since. So similar to what Heather said, it's okay if the path you start isn't the exact one you want to finish at. KPMG is my fourth company. I've been here 19 and a half years. It took me about 2 to 3 years per company for my first 3 to kind of find what I wanted to do, doing sales and marketing and different things. And now I like what I do and I like where I'm at. So it's okay. And as I said, I changed majors in school. So don't feel like just because you're 22 years old and you don't know exactly what you want to do the next 30 years. Neither did I, or maybe I did, and I'm not doing that. I'm doing something different at this point. So I think that's very normal. And I think that's where an internship is very helpful. And to what Heather said earlier, going to the company info sessions and things, find out about companies. There are companies, as an engineering major, I'd never heard of KPMG. I didn't know what they did because I wasn't an accountant. I was engineering. Now I'm still not an accountant, but I understand what we do. So I think learning about companies, don't just look for the brand name. Understand there's a lot of companies who do great things that you may not have heard of.
Yeah, and I think if you are in finance, you might not think that KPMG has tech roles.
Right.
And then,
You're right.
In Verizon, you don't think I have finance internships, but
Correct.
they're all pretty cross-functional. Most companies are, kind of dipping into the same pond. Sean and I didn't say hi last week, but we were both at the same conference looking for the same talent pool last week.
Yes.
We have team members at conferences this week doing the same thing.
Exactly. And, maybe when we were in school, there weren't a lot of company info sessions. And I like that that's something that students can take advantage of now. And, things have changed since we were in school, but it's great. And I'm not sure if you have any other advice that you would give to the average student who wants to stand out from other applicants, because that's a question we kind of get a lot. What can I do? Is it putting, their NAF experience on there? Is it just having a really complete resume? A lot of students do not remember to put their NAF experience on there. So Heather, I like that you just jumped on that.
Oh, 100%. Love it.
Because I look at NAF as something, and there's other things that you can do that you're enhancing your skills. It's one thing to take a job somewhere that pays you, and that's good. We all need a job that pays us at some point. But you also, when you join organizations or take part in NAF, which is going to help develop you, or I had a team member years ago who joined Toastmasters. Most of you probably haven't heard of that, but that's around like helping your public speaking. But if you have something in school that isn't your strength, and you join a group like that, or you join a group or take a job or a club that takes you maybe out of your comfort zone, and hey, I'm a very good computer programmer, but I wanted to learn a little more about writing because I feel I'm going to need some writing skills. So I joined this writing club. That helps you stand out because it's showing that it's not that you're a great computer programmer, so all you did during college was join computer programming groups. Like, that's good. But if you want to differentiate yourself, you need to also understand how to write, how to communicate. If it's vice versa, if you're a great writer and all that, you need to understand statistics and some of the technology skills. And so it's not becoming an expert, but finding things that expand your horizon of talking to different people, learning different skills. It makes it interesting too. So you're not just focused on the same stuff.
Definitely. And Mina, I see you have another question. Did you want to come off mute and ask about the recruitment cycles? Or did our speakers answer that for you?
Yeah, sure. So hypothetically, if you are, I know we touched base on this, but if you're in your junior year of college and recruitment's coming up and, of like summer internships that you want to apply, when should you start looking to apply? Like, when do most companies start recruiting for the summer? Because I know it's way ahead of time, but I was wondering when that timeline is. Is it in the fall or is it in the winter?
Now. Yeah, it's now for most. I think there's some it used to be investment banks did more in the spring. I don't know if that's still true anymore, but most companies, it's now. They'll recruit in the fall for the next summer.
There will be some ancillary. We're flexible with our business because our business runs on a fiscal year versus your academic year. And sometimes certain groups get different budget items, or they'll know what they collapsed from the 2022 budget that they can roll over to 23. And I get a couple of knocks from executives on the door like, ooh, I realized I had some extra spend. Can I allocate this towards interns? I've, figured out the pipeline for that. And we work with them because we don't want to discourage hiring more emerging talent. But then those roles, I still have a pipeline of candidates that didn't make the boat that I'd love to give them the first opportunity to be interviewed for those roles. Right. So now is the time. And unfortunately, I feel like over the last decade, that timeline has moved up. And so it's more competitive for you, the student. But I would just encourage you to get out there.
Yeah. That's right, especially those of you who are younger. So even as freshmen, start to talk to students. You go to the info sessions. If you go to Verizon session, I'm sure Heather or her team will be very upfront to, hey, this is the timeline. And if you're a freshman who can't apply right now, or maybe doesn't have something, you'll at least know, okay, next year, I've got to do it by this date, because this is when Verizon's opening. So unfortunately, I do meet those students sometimes who kind of miss it. And sometimes we do also have space available later on, but it's a business and we can't hire more than we've budgeted for.
And then I will give you a sneak peek without disclosing way too much, but Verizon's a federal contractor. That means I'm held to different audit standards than other private companies. And I have to report everything to the government, and I'm going to get audited on it. And if I do it uncompliantly, I'm going to get a very hefty fine. So that means, no, I am not going to bypass the process for you, because I am not going to get fined and I need to keep my job. I have 2 kids to feed. So what I mean by that is, as soon as you see something, just apply, even if you might withdraw. Of course, it's going to break my heart, but I won't go out of my compliant process, even for a temporary internship role for anyone. So if you see something, apply. It's much better than waiting too late and never being considered.
Yep, same here.
Heather and Sean, we had some questions come in ahead of time from the students. And one of them was, how do you bounce back after getting rejections?
Sean, you can go. I think I went first last time.
Okay, I'll go first. As someone who's been rejected recently for a role I applied for internally, so I can talk to that. But part of it is going into a role and understanding you don't necessarily know your competition for it, but understanding your skill set, what you bring to it, and taking an honest look at what the role is, what skills you have. So very briefly, the example, we had an open role for a global head of resourcing for us, kind of a recruiting role, but budget planning across the world for KPMG. And I was very interested in the role. I looked at some of the requirements, I'm like, I haven't done some of these things, but I thought it was worth applying for. I made it to the final round. Ultimately, they went with someone else who I know this person and they're a better fit. They have more global experience than I do in it. And so I looked at that and tried to say, well, does that mean KPMG doesn't like me or I can't work here? No, my boss was actually happy I didn't get it because she was happy to keep me on the team and not lose me to the other team. But I really tried to look at it and say, okay, if I didn't get this, why did I not get it? Are there other skills that I could build on? Now, I will be very upfront with you. Students often ask, can you explain why I didn't select you for the role? Unfortunately, the answer is usually no. Similar to kind of what Heather said with the government compliance, our legal team is all over everything. And we can't really go into depth and say, hey, Heather, you didn't get the job because, your GPA is just not strong enough. The reason we can't do that, let you know a secret, is because if Heather's GPA is 3.5 and I tell her we're not hiring her because her GPA is not strong enough, and then we hire Susan who's a 3.4, if Heather finds that out, we are liable. We could have a lawsuit because I told Heather her GPA wasn't high enough, but I hired someone with a lower GPA. I know that's not great. I know people don't like to hear it. I would want to hear. I've applied for plenty of jobs over my life where I didn't get, and I would like to hear why I didn't get them. But most large employers aren't going to tell you directly. There's legal reasons behind that. But that's where it's taking an honest look at yourself and saying, all right, this job required A, B, and C. Do I have that? And if I don't, what can I do to get there? So this job that I didn't get, this internal role at KPMG, I looked at that and said, okay, but I do want that role eventually. I know the guy who got it, he's going to retire well before I will. So I'm like, all right, maybe I have a chance when he retires to get that role. And then I talked to my boss, well, what else can I do to get other experiences so I'm ready for that when it comes up? Now, in your case, if it's for a first role, you don't necessarily have a boss, but okay, are there other classes you can take? Are there other organizations you can be part of? Where do you think you are lacking if someone were to look at you, and not lacking as a person, but just as matching that job description perfectly? And then the other thing to understand, sometimes you just have 700 people applying for 2 roles, and it's okay. It's not the end of the world. I look at it like, yeah, it's their loss. Like, they didn't get me, someone else is going to be happy to get me. So it's not easy. I've been there, but you try to look at myself. What can I do different? And also, I'm not going to let them get me down, because I know I can bring great quality to any role. So, Heather?
I was like nearly perfect. So what I get rejected. I've been rejected a lot, even at Verizon, and I have to have a humble moment that I sometimes would be like, I wish I was you. You've had this many promotions in this many years. What's your secret? Even if I'm thinking I didn't do a good enough job, it's a different, desire. How I bounce back, I let myself one night of crying. I cry that whole night. I cry and have my little pity party. And then the next day I wake up and I think about it, just what Sean said. But I really do ask for feedback. If they give it to me, I don't try to defend or try to prove that they're wrong and I have that and I should. Nope. The decision has been made. Accept it, but then start understanding how you can better represent that for yourself. One thing I would give as a tip to you guys is, before you go on an interview, if there's preferred qualifications and you did get selected for the interview, how not to get rejected is, I'll say, like, if you're trying to go for a tech role and it says Tableau and you never heard of it before, don't go in that interview without Googling Tableau, or R or something. YouTube it, watch a demo. It's so available to you. Say, hey, I haven't really had experience, but I watched this video on it and I think I could apply it to this project. You can think of a way of incorporating it in your talk track, and that goes back to your brand. You want to ensure that no matter what, I got this role because the last interview that I had was over our US finance team. And I wanted to be the associate director of the global finance team. I didn't get the job, but I aced the interview. I knew I was the top candidate. I knew that I was going to lose this to somebody who had 10 years of finance recruiting experience compared to my minimal. But I showed up to that interview with the 30, 60, 90 plan. I showed up asking CFOs in the business for verbatims and for recommendations. I made sure that I did everything I possibly could because I knew I was going to get rejected. And you might think, like, why would you put so much effort knowing you were going to get rejected? And it's because I knew this job was going to open up. And I knew that if I got a really good star and I got in front of my VP and nailed that I was going to be a star contender for this next job opening. And so think long-term, even if you know you're going to get rejected. Don't think about it like, I'm not going to try anymore. When you get into these big companies, your brand and your reputation is everything, and you are going to get turned down. It's actually harder sometimes to move internally. I'll give you the real truth than it is to even get in. And so just focus on smiling. Don't talk bad about your company. Don't talk bad about the process. Stay with any of your peers. Stay positive. Do your homework. Look at those jobs. Bounce back. Give yourself a pity party. I'm not going to decline that. And then bounce back strong. For those people that supported you to get the job, even if you got rejected, send them thank you notes for supporting you so that they will support you again in the future. And just keep on going. Shut the door, open the next one. And the grass isn't always greener on the other side. The grass is green where you water it. So just stay positive.
I like that expression.
I love that. I love that. There were so many great little pieces of advice in there. Always give 110%. You never know what's going to happen in the future. You could ace the interview and still not get the job, and it's not you, it's something else. And always research the company of the job you're applying for. because I've gone into interviews where they'll say, what do you know about our company? And some people don't. I've heard from people say, oh, I don't know. I mean, I read the job interview, or they'll know maybe one thing, and you kind of wonder why they're even applying for the job when they don't know about the company.
Mhm.
Another question that we got was about virtual internships. Are your internships in person? Are they virtual? Is it a mix? Are virtual internships here to stay? How do you feel about that?
I don't think they're here to stay. I think it's here to stay for next summer a little bit, but I think that campus is an ever evolving space, and we need to adjust to remain competitive in each landscape. For Verizon, though, I will say that we will match the working model of the business unit we're trying to support. And it's not one size fits all. So some are home-based, some are in person, and some are hybrid. We are trying to align to having interns within hub locations that make sense, so we can have those in-person opportunities, even if you're home-based. But simply, some people want to work for Verizon because they want to work on the network, and that's hands-on work, and you will be working 40 hours a week on the network. That hardware piece really sets us apart versus our software internships in our global technology space. And then most of our cyber jobs or other jobs within the finance or corporate space are home-based, but we are trying to find ways to have in-person opportunities. I don't know if it's one size fits all, but I certainly don't think they're here to stay 100% virtual.
Yeah, we're not dissimilar from that. All of our interns are required to be within what they say commutable distance to the office that they applied for. So again, we have 85 offices, but if you're in Chicago like me, you have to be able to come to the office. We will not reimburse you because you come to the office. Like, you have to be able to get to work. If you live too far away, then you can't be part of it. We're a client service business, so I'd say it's our people don't come in the office that often. They go to clients. So our teams are a mix of going to clients, going in the office, and working from home. What COVID did was change the ratio of how often we're at clients. So what we do expect from our interns is that they go in the office or to the client site 2 to 3 days a week on average, but much like Heather, it's team dependent. Our tax group pretty much works from the office all the time. So they want their interns in usually 4 days a week. They'll work from home on Fridays. Whereas our consulting group is never in the office. They're either at home or at the client. So they will tell their interns, if we're not at the client, work from home, because they're not going to be in the office. So it does vary by each business group. But it's not none of our groups are 100% virtual. All interns are expected to be in the office at various times, a little more for some groups, a little less for others.
Excellent. And I'm going to put out a call again to everyone here. If you have any questions, please come off mute. Please put your questions in the chat. Heather and Sean, I'm actually going to share your LinkedIn URLs, and I'll ask, how important is it when you're applying for an internship to have a LinkedIn profile?
Okay. I will say we are not as big on LinkedIn at the intern level. And that's not the case for every employer. The reason we use LinkedIn, but at the intern level, we don't use it as much, mainly because we have such a large group, about 160 people in the campus recruiting team in the US. We are in person at about 200 schools. We have another 150 schools that we manage virtually. And then there's just the open application for everybody else. So because we target there, we don't usually do a lot on LinkedIn other than just some general advertising at the campus. Again, our experienced hire, very different. But at the campus level, we've put much more of our emphasis and focus at meeting the candidates in person. That being said, I do think a LinkedIn profile is very important to start building, because there are a lot of employers who will use that. And we do search LinkedIn for some of our more hard to fill positions. But when it comes to campus, it's not a key source for us. So just being upfront with that. But we may be unusual in that sense. I don't know.
Not from my experience. I don't expect, I have a robust LinkedIn and I would love for you to follow me, but I'm not trying to target campus talent on LinkedIn.
Right.
For my MBA interns, yes, that's a different story. My PhD interns, yes, different story. But for my undergrad or community college interns, I am not trying to do it on LinkedIn, but I think it is great for you and good sage advice to start building that network for yourself now.
Agree.
Definitely. Do we have any other questions? You're all so quiet today. Anything else you want to know about internships with Verizon, KPMG? Heather.
I will say, I know it's a big trend right now to have like TikTok resumes and you're all doing your good TikTok like dances and all that. For us federal contractors, that is not legal yet to do that. So if you think that's going to get you your dream job, I would recommend get a LinkedIn profile.
Yes, that is true. The federal contract is we are a major federal contractor too. So there's a lot of restrictions in what we can do. So yeah, I always encourage students to, this has changed because way back when I went into school, it was about having resume paper and fancy paper, but nowadays it's all done online. But unless you're applying for a graphic design position where the design matters, then a normal resume is fine. The TikTok part, if you're applying for some role as an actor, maybe that matters. But again, if you're applying with Verizon or KPMG in a finance and a consulting and a technology-based role, keeping it straightforward is what matters. We're not necessarily looking for anything weird out of the box for those kind of roles. Different if you're graphic design or something like that, where a model or something would make a difference.
And I'll add, please have a professional email address or just your name, like Susan. My email here is sklyman@naf.org, but have just your name at Gmail, any funny words, or trying to be snarky when you're applying, because I'm pretty sure employers won't want to see that. Do we have any other questions? Yeah, Heather.
I was just going to add, a meeting Sean or I, an event is fantastic, and you might email us our resume. That's not applying. You have to go on the website and apply. It's a great connection, and we will send you to somebody on our teams and they will reach out. But you have to actually apply. That's why I always say, please make sure you do that and then tell all your friends.
Yeah. Good point. Good point.
Well, I'm not seeing any other questions here, but I think we covered a lot of great points. This was such an informative session. I really hope everyone on this call is walking away with information that they didn't have before. Thank you so much, Heather and Sean, for taking the time to be here today. And I'm going to end the recording here and I'll send it out tomorrow.
Thank you.
Oh, well, and I just have a few announcements. If people want to hang on just a little bit, let me stop the recording.